I was born creative. I could feel it, like an itch under my skin, like a rumbling in my chest, like an ache in my heart. And so from a very young age, I started to write stories. I would write on the margins of my notebooks, on the soles of my shoes, on my forearms. Nothing within arm's reach was safe. And I knew that I was going to be an author. I knew my name was going to be on book covers and on bookshelves. And it was this big, bold, and beautiful dream, and I spent every single day honoring it. And then one day, it ended. I was sitting on the passenger seat of my dad's car, pile of books next to my feet, books propped up in my hand, and I was reading because I wanted to be a master. And so there I was, and my father looked over at me and said, "Just stop." And he took the book from my hand and he threw it out the window. And I remember that feeling of my heart breaking. I looked into that rearview mirror and I saw the book get smaller and smaller. And I could hear, "Just stop writing. Just stop dreaming." And so there, in that car, I left my dream on the side of a dusty road. It would be 10 years before I read or wrote for pleasure again. And I remember that moment. I was sitting in my basement apartment, in my bedroom, on the carpet, cross-legged, big, round, pregnant belly, and I was sorting through what I thought was trash and clutter, and I was ready to throw it all out. And then I found something. A few pages with crazy scribbled notes. And it was from that young girl and the story she was writing. And it hit me that I had spent a decade doing everything I thought I should do, shoving aside that feeling of emptiness. And there it was, that girl, that dream staring me back in the face. And I burst into tears. Because here I was, about to be a mother, and I dreamed of her, living her dreams. And I had given up on mine. And so on that day, I made a promise. Because if I was going to beg my daughter to live her dreams, it was time for me to live mine. And on that day, I started writing. But I had 10 years of insecurities, of fears, of hearing in my head, "Just stop," in my head. And it was hard. It was difficult every time I picked up the pen, and yet I still did it. But then, after hours of writing, I got into an argument with a loved one, and they picked up my printed out manuscript and they said, "Just stop. Why are you wasting your time?" And he threw the manuscript in the trash. And there I was, across the room, staring at my pages in the trash. And everything inside of me screamed to retreat, to hide, to surrender, to give up. It's too much. It's too hard. But then I remembered my promise. And so I walked over to that trash can, staring this man dead in the face, reached in and pulled out my manuscript and said, I write because I have to. And I had never stopped writing since. And now here I am, 3 books later, 3 bestsellers later, 3 books that united tribes, tens of thousands of books out in the world across the globe, people writing to me to say that my story inspired theirs. And it makes me realize it was all worth it. Every challenge, every obstacle, every day I fought to create was a day I fought for something, because in those moments, I was my most expressed, my most lit up, my most on fire. And that is what I want to see. Because I see every single day people and their broken dreams. People who have left that bold and blazing and beautiful and powerful self out on a dusty road. And I want you to go back and find her. The world is so desperate and aching for your creative fire. You have to bring it to the world. But before we can unleash our creative fire, our soul, our voice, our mission, our message onto the world, we need a few things. 1, audacity. Because when we decide to own our creative power, we have to have the unshakable belief in ourselves. Because once we step up to own something, once we step up to say, this is who I am, the whole society will come back at you and say, you can't, you won't, it's impossible, you're unworthy, you're not enough. And you have to have the audacity to fight back and say, I can, I will, I must, just watch me. And when you have that, mastery of your craft is possible. So often I see people charging in like warriors, ready to own their creative magic, and then they back off when it gets a little hard, forgetting that it takes 10,000 hours of mastery to become a master of your craft. And then that creative fire dims down, gets lost again, turns to ashes. But what I want you to do is remember that audacity. Fight for this mastery. And sometimes that requires you to stay up late. Wake up early, take a class, invest in a program, go to the galleries, anything that is required of you to become masterful. Because I promise you, just beyond that mastery is your most potent and powerful self. Third, you need tenacity. You need the drive, the willingness to get dirty, because with tenacity, the audacity pays off because you keep showing up with it. With tenacity, the mastery happens because you keep fighting for it. With tenacity, the dream becomes real. Because the dream can only live in a tenacious heart. And that is what I want for each and every one of you. As creatives, we have a fire within us. As creatives, we are born to blaze. As creatives, we are meant to rise up and change the world. One page, one stage, one brushstroke at a time. We simply have to be brave enough to believe it.